really makes me think again. Oh no. Okay. Okay. So I see people on Discord talking already. I can't hear anything right now. But preparations are complete. Was that the jiggle? So we are gonna be doing this. I hope my scene's okay. I'm gonna swap over this. No one's here yet, so let's see. Okay, so this needs to be bigger. Good to know. Good talk. I know it looks ass, but otherwise you can't see chat well. So, well, let me actually unmute Discord real quick. Because oh my god, the music's way too loud as well. There we go. Right, so I can hear you in Discord again.
Alright.
Right, are we, by the way, is this all the people that are gonna be joining? I think it is.
Pretty sure, yeah. Just need the set mix to unmute.
Yeah. So
I am here.
But before we begin, I wanna make sure if anything's missing from the screen, like any vital information that I need to fix before we start. I do not think so. I think we're good. We might get a couple more midway. It's all there? Alright, okay. Right.
Yeah. Looks like it.
Yup. Alright.
Yup.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, you're right.
It's all good. It's all good.
Right, okay, so, without further ado, I think. Though then again, do we actually, hold on. Do we have like shoutouts for this? Because I do not have that many followers, to be quite honest. Like, do we have...
Shoutouts?
Shoutouts? Yeah, Twitter or something.
Yeah, Twitter and Twitch.
Or, I don't know if Piers has a Twitter follower. Well, I gotta do my Discord. Big announcement. Hold on. That gets us like 2 people.
I can probably put an announcement in my Discord.
Right. Well, maybe people will find us. We'll see. Either way, this is probably gonna be going to the devs again. So, what's your language? I think. Or maybe not. Don't.
Watch my language.
No, yeah, that goes to you, Satmix.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
I always use.
We're gonna be in purgatory.
I always use appropriate language for every occasion.
The most appropriate gamer around. Right.
We are all appropriate gamers.
Okay. So the first topic that we have today is a Reddit post. Yeah. Good old Reddit. But it was, at least not made by someone who is a Redditor.
Now that's toxic. And then you tell me to watch my language.
It's all good and fun jokes. Right, so actually, yeah, you should probably introduce it yourself, to be honest. You made it.
Alright, so our first topic today is a post I made while very tired and not paying too much attention. It was about why I think most people who, self-identify or identified as casuals in the For Honor community dislike the idea that reads are a necessary skill in a game like this. That's basically what the post was about. We're going to be talking a little bit about it today. I didn't expect to be here, by the way. I just kind of got DM'd about it. I got DM'd about it by Lord Dem.
He shouted you out, like, I saw that thing you posted on Reddit, you're not gonna explain yourself.
Yeah, I gotta explain why I'm so toxic, why I hate casual players.
Right, so this is a rather expensive post as well. You introduce yourself a bit, of your competitive background, I guess, and the fighting background that you have, fighting games background that you had. Yeah. And the entire thing really boils down to what is like a read, what is reactions, and how does that translate from fighting games to For Honor. And that is going to be our topic. We're going to be talking about, Well, I guess since I didn't know this until like 5 minutes ago, we're going to be talking about Reed's reactions For Honor, I assume, or maybe in general. So Clutch will also join us later, it seems.
As
a general thing, right? Well, I guess the attitude towards Reeds as well, because it was like your topic in the post as well. The actual attitude from players towards Reeds compared to reactions and the general gameplay in For Honor.
Yeah.
The Reddit post on my screen. Yeah, that's something that I maybe can do. Let's see if we can do that. That I would need
that would be
source.
brilliant.
Well, while I'm doing that, you can already start without me. I'm going to try to put it on the screen.
All right. Now I just have to figure out how we're gonna actually start.
Initiating a topic is always the hardest part.
Hey, probably the first thing we want to talk about is maybe how the casual community views reads and like that high level mindset. And
I suppose that works. What do you think, Semix?
I mean, I feel like people look at reads from a wrong perspective. Usually when I talk to casual players about reads, it always comes down to people saying, well, but then in that case, it's just a guess. And I'm like, no, it's not how it works. People think if you have to make a read, you will always have to make a guess, and you will always it's more luck-based than skill-based, which is not true at all. It's actually a lot of skill-based, and I think if every attack is reactable, there is no way to open up your opponent reliably, which is a huge issue in For Honor because almost all attacks are reactable. So, yeah, it's basically my part on that.
I feel a fair way of describing reads from playing the fighting games for so long, or any medium where they're fairly prevalent, is I think the good term to say is reads are basically an educated guess. There is still guesswork, like that's definitely not untrue, but it comes with experience, and basically what I said in the post, the more you play and the more you look at the people around you who play and how they play, you'll learn how to figure out what's going to happen, especially if you know how the characters work. Now, with For Honor, I find it's a lot easier to figure out what a character can do, what a player might do, because there simply isn't really that much going on in this game. And I feel like reads being integral, I think it's a lot better than reactions being at the forefront, because as Setminx just said, pretty much everything, sans a few things in the game, is reactable, which is, in my opinion, unhealthy, because it essentially just means the only people who will ever be very good are people who have way above average reactions, and we have many of those people in the competitive scene. And were that the case, if we went back to old Season 1 Turtle meta, they would essentially be the only players who exist, and everybody else would essentially be a joke. At least that's the way I look at it. I feel like it is guesswork, but it is something that comes with a lot more skill and experience than just blind guessing. Luck might play a part sometimes when you fight people who might not be so good, so you can't quite figure out what they're trying to do because they might not know their own game plan. But I think that's more of an isolated case than something straightforward, like it's always luck. Because if it was always luck, then you wouldn't really see in For Honor or fighting games in general the plays that you tend to like know about most, where people make the game-winning read. Because if it was just luck, these things would be a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. We're inferment based on your opponent's patterns and their play style, really.
Yeah.
And it kind of just marry.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how I see it, at least.
I mean, is there a substantial amount of players that are even questioning this? Like, I think it's a bit of a ridiculous thing to even ask. That if there is even a thing such as a read in the game.
I don't think it's an overwhelmingly common view, but I do tend to see it. It's a sentiment expressed. It's mostly a vocal minority.
Yeah, because it feels kind of weird, because you have that in any competition between two human players, in any game.
Yeah.
Like, there's always reads.
like reads are a thing in any kind of multiplayer game, like even ones where you think they might not be. There are some where they essentially don't apply with like certain. I don't know if it's really fair to say that. I think reads are like pretty much always relevant, even in very simple mediums, because in some
Like
way
chess.
you are, yeah, because you are looking for what you think they're going to do and what they might do, and if you played against them before, sure enough, you'll probably catch on to something. So I think
Yeah, like
it's
a
there no matter
Sorry,
what,
like what?
regardless of how simple it is.
Yeah, I agree. Like in boxing, you have reads in boxing. Is this guy is he trying to, dodge my attack? Is he trying to go for, like an uppercut, a body blow, or, maybe in like MMA, they go for a takedown, or they try and get me in the clinch, something like that. And even chess, where they get try and just go straight for my king, or they actually get to play the long game, go for the pawns first, and then, maybe take my queen out early on, something like that. And it just really comes down to knowing your opponent, trying to figure out their play style by really just paying attention and deciphering their movements, seeing, what they're doing and inferring where they're going to go next based on what they're already doing. And I mean, it takes a lot of observation, really. And I think that's why a lot of people get frustrated in this game, because they want to play the game just to have a good time, hang out, enjoy, maybe have a couple laughs, whatever. And that's fine. But it comes to a point where, you go against a good player, and it's going to be a lot more difficult, because then for them, it's not all laughs sometimes. Maybe they just want to win. Maybe they just want to, be number one, whatever. So you go against this person, and they completely slaughter you. And the reason being is they observe everything you're doing. Maybe you're throwing like 3, lights from top in a row, or from side, maybe a shell in. Every single time you're just going for lights, no heavies. They're going to realize that very quick, capitalize it by parrying, and then, predicting your movements after that. And you're going to have a tough time beating them, if impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, reads go, like, they get really small too, because, like, predicting someone to go to a certain point at a certain time already is a read. Like, if the game starts and we take a home point and we say, okay, I know someone's coming to immediately back up, like, that's a read. You don't see them yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's getting, it's already in that small dimension. So you're making reads all the time, even like in shooters and stuff, like by predicting where someone, like, is he gonna be around this corner, or you saw him go behind a building and you're gonna predict from which end he's gonna come out of. Those are all reads, and of course For Honor has them in spades as well.
Exactly. I feel like Lord, we should probably explain, just for the people who might not know, what the difference between reads and reactions are, just for the sake of it. So the obvious one here is that a read is essentially a prediction. You are looking into what you think the opponent might be doing, and after that, you're responding in a way to, try and defend or attack against a particular behavior you have caught on to. And a reaction is quite simply a natural process where you react to something that someone has done. Say, in this case, let's just go for the low-hanging fruit. You're reacting to an unfeinted raider zone or something, and you're parrying it. Or you're reacting to 600 MS lights, and you're blocking or parrying, and all those kinds of things. That's essentially the difference.
Yeah.
And it's quite simple, really. It's just, I don't think many people don't know this, but in case someone might see this and not know why we're even talking about reads and why it's an issue to some people, I think that explanation is sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, the best example for an unreactable move that requires you to make a read is the Warden's Shoulder Bash. The reaction windows are too tight for a human to actually react to it. Because of that, you are forced to actually make a read and think about what your opponent is about to do and what he's about to throw out. And that's what separates a reactable move from an unreactable move. And that's why we need moves that are unreactable, because that's the only way for us to open someone up.
Yep, pretty much. If we all remember back in the early days of For Honor, where you could essentially win just by blocking, because if you remember the hell that was regenerating health at critical. you could stand there and block or parry until you finally killed whoever it was. So the fact that people tend to forget that this is what the game was like before reads were introduced is disconcerting, at the very least. I don't really see how that's fun.
Yeah, but it's like, of course, that's how you would make it more interesting. Right now, we are kind of in an impasse of, we kind of only have one form of unreactable gameplay, well, kind of two, which are both not really optimal in my opinion. Like we have 400 ms lights, which is not exactly, it feels more like a band-aid than it does for like a proper fix. And then we have bashes that, well, they will definitely be part of that, but I feel like that needs to be something. But that's probably not our topic.
Not really, no.
No.
I feel like explaining what we feel about it doesn't really help anything.
Yeah.
It just kind of turns into an opinion piece. Like, I can say I think it's a band-aid all I like, which I agree, but I don't think it would really explain anything to anyone.
I think for like a lot of the low-level players where they get frustrated. I was trying to say this earlier and I kind of forgot, but now that I have it down pat. But you know, like I was saying, some people just are playing the game to have a good time and kind of relax and maybe even blow off steam after a day of work. But when you go against, let's say, a high-level player, in order to do well against them, you're going to have to make a read. You know, you have to observe their patterns and plan your next move accordingly, et cetera, et cetera. And what it really comes down to is you're going to have to think. Some people don't want to have to think when they play a video game. They just want to kind of, you know, react and just enjoy themselves and not really have to put much thought into it. You know, for example, yesterday I was playing with Clutch and I think Crack, Zero Crack. And we played a couple matches of Dominion, and I was doing okay at first, and then I started having some IRL issues I don't really want to go into, but it affected my gameplay. I wasn't really enjoying myself after that. And I was like, you know, eventually it's like I have to go. I'm not really enjoying the game right now. Yeah. So I ended up playing VR chat for like an hour. I felt way better. It was just like low stress. You know, I just kind of got to mess around and joke around with people, and it was really nice to just kind of get into that casual environment where I didn't really have to think. I could just do whatever I wanted. Didn't really have to try.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I like it too. Like, whenever, or if, I haven't played For Honor in about, like, nearly a month. But, if I ever do boot up For Honor and I just go into matchmaking, all I do is I just pick Berserker and I just want to mash heavy and light and kill people. I don't like thinking too hard when I'm chilling out, which I can completely understand that point of view since I experience it. But when it comes to, like, I don't know, duels specifically, or any competitive games like scrims or tournaments or stuff like that, I think it's unhealthy to not want reads or not want to think about, like, in those environments, because a duel is quite literally you want to outplay your opponent, right?
It's a test of skill.
Yeah. You want to prove you're better than them. And I don't think that being able to react better than somebody else necessarily proves that you're better. Which ultimately is just my point. I don't think it's anywhere near as engaging as the cerebral nature of reads or anything like that.
I mean, is For Honor any like a relaxing game in the first place? Like, you wouldn't play chess to relax.
No, I don't think For Honor is an inherently relaxing game. I think it's just because of, like, the way video games generally are now. You always, you know, you just want to sit down and chill out, have a coffee or something. But I've never thought of multiplayer games, even at the most casual, as, like, inherently stressless. Someone's going to play in a certain way that is invariably going to annoy you. And even if it's, like, not legitimate, or if it is, I feel like it being legitimate shouldn't be, you know, like a community issue. I don't feel like this person is using things I can't just muscle through. These people are toxic tryhards. I think that's just insanely reductive.
Yeah, I agree.
And
it doesn't really benefit anybody to have that mindset. It kind of just drags the player base down, because then maybe you get one person with that mindset, they talk with their friend like starts to agree with them, like, yeah, you're right, they are toxic, I hate those guys, fuck them. That guy goes on the Reddit, makes a post, and like you get 30 other people commenting like, yeah, fuck those guys, I hate those bastards. Then all of a sudden you get this like movement of like, oh, these fucking toxic players, they're assholes because they use kite strat or whatever, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's in a way, Kite Strat kind of emphasized this whole point of trying to play optimally. Not that I'm calling Kite Strat optimal, because it isn't really the best thing you could do in a 1v1, but it definitely exemplifies the weird divide between casual players who just don't want to ever think about anything and people who actually like trying. And I don't think trying means you're not having fun. I'm a firm believer that you can have fun and be competitive and try. I think it goes hand in hand, really. I'm a fairly competitive person. I enjoy winning. Some people just enjoy winning more than they enjoy just sitting down and mindlessly pressing buttons, and that's always how it's going to be in multiplayer games.
Oh yeah, of course. Like for me, for example, I enjoy both. You know, sometimes I want to play like, you know, like I said, VR chat or just something like a game with my fiance just to hang out and have fun. You know, not really try and just have a good time. And then I'll just go and sit in duels and go into ranked, and I'm really trying to win, and that's my enjoyment in that moment. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely shades of that for everybody. Shades of enjoyment for what they kind of desiring moment to moment in a video game.
Yeah, I mean, everyone enjoys things differently.
Yeah,
like,
it's not just
I don't think
constricted
it's bad
to
inherently
games,
that people don't enjoy wanting to think. I think it's bad when it becomes an opinion that's almost like desiring change because they can't adjust to it.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with that because imagine if the developers listened to them and all attacks were like 1,000 milliseconds. You know, you had 1,000 millisecond lights and 2,000 millisecond heavies. So everybody.
Yeah, I would completely stop playing if that was the case. Like, I might be able to react to stuff like that some people can't react to, but at that point it's just like, oh, okay, everyone's equal. I can't possibly prove I'm better than someone. How is anyone supposed to trip me up? How am I supposed to trip anyone up at that point? Sure, that's an extreme example, but I feel like that basically goes to my point. When things are reactable, you're not really proving anything other than you can unconsciously respond to situations better than other people.
Yeah, and I think that's where fighting games really excel, is in more of a fast-paced environment. You know, if you take like Dragon Ball FighterZ, for example, or even Guilty Gear.
Yep.
Those are two like really, really fast-paced games. I mean, you can even see in like Mortal Kombat as well. I just watched a tournament the other day with like Sonic Fox. I think it was like Rewind or something like that.
Yeah,
the other guys
I've watched the same tournament.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. It was super fast-paced. I mean, these guys are fantastic at the game. And I couldn't personally, you know, at the level I play Mortal Kombat, react to the things like they were, and it was insane to watch. Now, imagine if that was like half speed, you know? That wouldn't be as enjoyable.
It simply wouldn't be as interesting either.
Yeah, and that's why I say that I think that's where fighting games excel, because, you know, faster paced fighting game, not only is it usually more fun to watch objectively, it is more entertaining to play. Just because you're able to do more at a faster pace and not at a snail's pace, which, you know, nobody wants to play a fighting game where they feel like their character's stuck in a pile of glue and they feel like they're moving at a snail's pace. That's just not fun.
I think just strictly saying faster fighting game equals more entertainment isn't exactly 100% accurate, because I mean Street Fighter V is not exactly a super fast-paced game, and that's still one of the most popular fighting games there are around right now. It's a lot slower than Guilty Gear, and I mean Guilty Gear, it has one of the smallest scenes out of all the major fighting games right now. I think it's a lot deeper and a lot more complicated than simply to do with the pace or the intensity of a game.
Of course.
Yeah. No, like, speed isn't the defining factor, but, like, one thing I'll point out about, like, anime fighters is they tend to have a much smaller player base just because it's more of a niche than Street Fighter or anything like that, but they also tend to have extreme execution barriers, which are a bit different from, like, reads and so on. Simply just being able to do things is hard inherently. Of course, the same goes for Street Fighter and Tekken or Soul Calibur or anything like that. But there's always like a lot more going on than just how fast it is.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, speed is sometimes a factor. I wouldn't like a very slow game, like so slow that nothing feels like anything's happening, but definitely not to the point where it's so fast that nothing matters. That's not something I feel is good either.
Yeah, and as with anything, there's always a fine balance, and there's always, like Clutch was saying, there's different aspects that come into play because Street Fighter has a really deep combat system that's extremely fluid as well. There's a lot of things you can do in that game. Same with like Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur has a lot of Soul Calibur has a bunch of shit going on.
Yep.
I think like where For Honor kind of in some points misses the mark, it's a lot more simple in some regards than Street Fighters or Soul Caliburs.
Yeah, there's generally a lot less in For Honor.
But I know Dem wanted to get us to explain a specific example, like a heavy feint versus a ward and what a ward can do when it's considered a correct and bad read. Maybe Clutch, you want to put some input on that?
Regarding what?
He put in chat, take an example and try and explain it, such as a heavy feint versus a warden, and what a warden can do from that, and what is considered a correct or a bad read.
I mean, I would probably use a better example than a simple heavy feint. Like, I mean, I guess if you're talking about last frame feints on heavy feints, those aren't exactly the easiest to react to, and you usually have to make a read, whether they're going to go through with it or not. But I guess like I think one of the best examples of like a genuine read you'll probably have in this game is if you're playing against a Shaolin and he manages to get to key stance and he's right in front of you, right? Because you're usually left to make it's not just a simple read, it's not just a simple right. Is the Shaolin going to kick me or is he going to go for a side undodgeable heavy? Because he has like multiple options he can use, right? He can either do both of those things immediately. He can delay actually doing anything just to see if the opponent will dodge early, right? Because if you wait for them to dodge early, you won't be able to react to it with the side heavy, but you'll be able to react to the side dodge with a kick, and the kick will be guaranteed into 20 damage. Or the like what a lot of characters who have stable guard that don't have superior block, so they can continue guarding on the side where they were guarding last as they dodge. You can leave a guard left or right, and then dodge to the side, and that way if they do go for the undodgeable side heavy, basically it will only land on the one side, but then the Shaolin can do something like top light to catch somebody who's put their guard to the side to catch or to help reduce the likelihood of a side heavy landing. So from key stance, right, the Shaolin has like 4+ options that he can go for out of that stance. I mean, you also have like if you're playing against a warden, is he going to zone, like try to zone me out of the key stance? Is he going to make a read? I'm going to be sat in this stance for a while, and then you can go for things like crushing counters, but that's an option you don't tend to use as much. But I think that would be a good example of like reads in For Honor, and I also think it's a good example of how having a character that has these like that you have to make these reads against, and also that you have to make reads correctly for to be able to land a lot of damage, because Shaolin can put out a lot of damage. He struggles to get into key stance against good players because you have to basically risk going for like a heavy into a chain, because your lights are never going to land against a Sable Guard character because they can just block top and react to your side lights. But if he gets into key stance or is able to get into key stance, then yes, he can put out a lot of damage if he reads correctly, but he can also take a lot of damage because you can take a lot of damage for making the wrong reads when you're in key stance. But as I was saying, like I think Shaolin's actually a good example of how reads, or a character based heavily on reads for both offense and countering the character, is a lot of fun. Because I think a lot of people will agree that Shaolin is one of the most entertaining characters, both to play as and to play against, if we ignore the whole struggling to get into key stance thing. And I think it's a good example of how moving forward they can continue designing certain openers that have these like multitude of options available to a character, and you have different ways to react to counter each option, but then there's also other options a character can use to then counter the reads that other players are making. So I mean, you have other examples. I mean, there's also Warden, for example. Like when you see a Warden, like either dodge to the side, dodge backwards, or dodge forwards, and you're inside of level 1 range, there isn't a single option that you can make or a single decision that you can make that will lead to you avoiding every single option the Warden can do, right? Like let's say you dodge early to avoid the level 1, a level 3 will catch that. If you dodge early and then unlock to roll away, that will dodge all levels of the shoulder charge, but the Warden can't like he can feint the shoulder bash into Valiant Breakthrough, his dash forward to catch the roll. You can dodge late to just avoid the level 3, but then a level 1 and a level 2 will catch a dodge time to avoid level 3. Like there's and obviously if a character makes a read that you're going to go for a level 3 and tries to hit you out of the shoulder bash, then the Warden can just go for a level 1, feint it immediately and parry. Like there's not there isn't an action you can take against a Warden who's in range for level 1 that will make you avoid damage 100% of the time. Like there used to be, because that used to be the problem with Warden, right? Like when he would initiate his shoulder bash, then you could just roll away and it would avoid every single possible option that the Warden could do. The Warden couldn't really do anything to land any damage on you. But now, Warden is also another character whom, as soon as he initiates that level 1, there's always going to be something the Warden can go through with which will land damage. And it's I know a lot of people hate on Warden. It's mostly because of the whole 40 damage off of the level 3. A lot of people say it's a coin flip, landing 40 damage off a coin flip or whatever, which is bullshit because there's more than just 2 choices as soon as the Warden begins his shoulder bash. But I also believe that Warden, and I've also discussed this with Setmix as well, that Warden is also one of the better reworks because he actually has genuine offense. You can't just sit there and be 100% passive and completely shut down a Warden. Like, yeah, you can be somewhat defensive if you distance correctly, but Warden's still going to have a much better time of opening somebody up who's just trying to sit there and defend than 90% plus of the cast. And again, I personally find Warden a lot more fun to play than, again, a lot of the cast, at least specifically in 1v1s because of those reasons. And I think both Shaolin and Warden are really good examples of characters that are based on reads, which show that introducing more mechanics or general character designs that revolve around these mechanics that have reads to open people up is a good thing. And I think we all saw when the game first came out that having a majority of characters that you can just react to is very, very bad.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I agree.
Yeah, same.
Of course, another character who he doesn't quite promote reads on the exact same level, but he definitely requires them to both play as and play against a lot of the time is Berserker, because he essentially forces you, if he starts his offense, which can be a pain because it's kind of easy to walk away from him, but if he does start his offense on you, it's quite difficult to stop him without making the correct prediction. But of course he also has to figure out, like, where does he think you're going to parry or guard or stuff like that, or not just throwing lights, because if he throws lights, eventually they're just going to get parried, because if he only throws lights and if he has a specific pattern where he throws them, eventually they'll almost always get parried. But he's not quite on the same level as Warden and Shaolin, but he's definitely a step in the right direction for characters who want to attack because he can, as opposed to people who just can't, like Lawbringer.
Yeah, Berserker's very much on that level where, like, for a majority of players, yeah, you also have to make reads against him, right? But the reason why I pointed out, like, Shaolin and Warden in particular is because, particularly Warden, it doesn't matter, like, how insanely fast your reactions might be, you aren't going to react to, like, Warden's different options. It's just flat out impossible, because even if you try to react to, the Warden moving forward out of a shoulder bash to then react to movement, the Warden can obviously, he can slide and then feint at the start, which basically means that there's so little time between the point where the warden's past the point of being able to feint to the point where he hits you, where it's too little time to actually reasonably react to it, even if you have like 100 ms reaction time. Whereas with Berserker, there are like a very small group of players who can consistently, like above 75% of the time, react to like Berserker's offense and really stifle his offense. Like, yeah, you're still not going to block every single light 100% of the time, but you can react to it consistently enough to where it will heavily reduce just how aggressive or how much damage a Berserker can actually land through on you. Whereas you can't do that with a character like Warden. Like, yes, he's safer somewhat starting his offense because, you know, he has hyper armor, he can trade, whatever. But once he actually gets his offense started, it's capable from at least a small group of players to stifle or heavily hinder his offense compared to a character like Warden, which is why I used Warden and Shaolin.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's kind of like the proto version of them, because while he definitely encourages reads, there's that small group who can, whereas those two characters have multiple branching options from any of their established offensive moves. So it's pretty much impossible to make that kind of choice reaction, which is why they're a lot better designed, in my opinion.
Right, so this is a question to Clutch, and Setmix probably prioritizing them, because, well, I don't know why. Let's just do that. But a player that is just going about and wants to, you know, he just runs up and wants to react to everything. He thinks he can react to everything. How can someone like that improve to be more read-oriented compared to his reactive style, which has probably not, you know, been very effective against certain classes, such as Shaolin or the Warden?
Do you want to start, or
You can start, Zach, because I just went on a large rant anyway.
Sure. I think this mostly comes down to the mindset of the player. You will have to admit at some point that you can't react to certain moves because, as Clutch said earlier, moves like Warden Shoulder Bash are just not reactable. And if you can't admit to yourself that you cannot react to those moves, you will not improve and you will not become a read-oriented player. So you will have to change your entire mindset for that, and I think that's the most important thing about this. So I don't think there's much to say to that.
I think the most important thing about making reads is getting comfortable with the options that you have and the options that the enemy has. Like,
you should know. Exactly, you have to know the movesets of the characters, and you have to know what a character is capable of doing. But if you're in the mindset stuck that you can react to every single move, you will not make a read. So you will have to change your mindset.
So essentially, like, if you want to get better at reading, it's literally just knowing, like, go into a game, a duel preferably, against any hero, and from any move he does, from like a dash or from neutral, you should be aware of what moves he can do. Like, out of neutral, the normal things like heavy, light, zone probably apply, and then when a Warden dashes, he also gets the option for a shoulder bash. And, you know, what are your options when he goes for that? And what is his options? And what is the best option for him to go, which probably involves your health as well. And, like, it changes from time to time. And, of course, knowing what he has gone for in the past. So that's pretty much how you do reads. It's just knowing what is optimal right now for the opponent to go for. And also, of course, knowing if the opponent even goes for optimal things or, like, unoptimal things. Because it could very well be that the opponent either knows that you're aware of the optimal option, or he doesn't know it himself. So you can't make reads against anyone. Reads get more viable the more the enemy is actually aware of his options.
Yeah, it all comes down to experience for both players, and of course, knowing the characters most of.
Alright, so okay, hold on. What is this?
I was just going to say that I can actually kind of remember, like, I actually went through this process when I first started the game as well, because when I used to play DC Universe Online, there used to be, like, a whole part of their game was they had, like, a rock, paper, scissors combat mechanic, right? And there were block breaks, which were, like, ranged attacks, which would like counter somebody who was trying to block, right? And then blocks would obviously counter heavy attacks. And you could block break on reaction to seeing the block animation and catch them. But there was also a mechanic where you could roll away, which would basically give you the iframes to avoid the block break, right? Which added reads onto this purely reaction read mechanic. But coming from that game, I was considered one of, if not the best player who could react to these things consistently. So when I came into For Honor, my mindset was very heavily like, oh, I want to be able to react to everything. And it's when I first started the game, I found that the typical like progression path a player will go through is, right, they'll come into the game and they'll struggle to do anything, right? They won't know their punishes, but more importantly, they won't be able to react to anything, or they'll find it very difficult to react to things. And they won't have any fucking idea what any character can do, so they can't make any reads. So the first thing that a player will start to improve on, right, is they'll start getting more familiar with animations, you know, things like guard breaks, things like attacks, and they'll start to be able to react to things better. And then that's typically when players will go into that mindset of, oh, okay, I'm starting to react to things now. I bet if I can continue this, I can react to everything. Unfortunately, now there are characters whom, you know, there are things you just can't react to. And in order to start moving from, you know, going from that player who is trying to react to everything and improving to a point where you can start, you know, understanding reads and using them both to defend and attack, you really have to learn, like, kind of as what Silber was saying, like, you need to learn all of the options both you and your character have, but you also need to understand the actions that you make and the frequency of which you do certain things will also influence how your opponent reacts, right? So I'll pick Warden for this example. Let's say you're playing against a lower skill versus a higher skill player. If you're playing like a low skill player, then a lot of the times I'll probably just dodge on level 1, right? Because a lot of people will get into the habit of seeing orange and they'll just dodge. And lower skill players don't tend to like try to roll away a lot, and they'll get caught by level 3s quite often. However, if you go up against like more experienced players, typically they will not dodge on level 1 timing, right? And they will typically end up getting hit more by level 1 bashes. So if I take the example of a more experienced player, let's say I hit them with a couple of level 1s, because a lot of the time, a lot of wardens from like mid to like mid-high skill level will dodge forward and they'll sit hoping to see you dodge so they can react to that dodge and hit you with a level 3, right? But let's say we're going up against a player who's expecting this, and you just let a couple of level 1s go, which they won't be expecting. After the second one lands, the opponent is probably going to be thinking to themselves, okay, this guy likes to use a lot of level 1s. I'm going to dodge on level 1 timing next time. Then you can try going for that level 3, right? Because you've gone for this level 1 option twice, which has influenced the thinking of the opponent. Obviously, when you initiate that level 1, you have a choice. You either dodge on level 1 timing, you dodge on level 3 timing, you dodge on level 1, then unlock to avoid the level 3, or you sit there and anticipate somebody's just going to make a read and go for like a Valiant Breakthrough on read. So this player went for the level 3 read twice, but then after these 2 level 1s, it's already started to change his way of thinking, and he's going to be expecting a level 1 for the 3rd time. This is something that's a very common thing in fighting games. It's known as conditioning your opponent. You do certain things in order to change how they think and make them act in a way that you want them to act, right? So you do this twice, and then you go through with a level 3. They'll try to dodge the level 1, and they can then land the level 3. Or you, can land the level 3 to land that 40 damage. And this is something that a lot of the read-based characters like need to understand to be able to land their damage and to land their offense. But the problem is like, whereas with reacting to things, you simply just need to know animations and get more used to the game. To be able to utilize conditioning, right, and with these characters, to be able to really maximize their offense, you really have to understand what your character can do, what the other character can do, and how they're going to be reacting to your different options. Because how somebody reacts to one shoulder bash can differ on character, right? Because Nobushi can do different things. She doesn't have to dodge on level 1, then roll away to avoid level 3. She can dodge into hidden stance. But of course, there are other things that a warden can do to punish things like that, which adds even further depth, and you need even more game knowledge in order to play against these characters. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'll just stick to the basic options to nullify that offense. But in order to know these things, you have to be more experienced at the game, right? Someone who's played this game for like 10, 20, 30 hours or 50 hours or whatever isn't going to completely understand the entirety of the mind games behind something like that. And yet, I'm sure there will be people who say like, oh, no, that silly warden's really basic. It's simple. You just spam shoulder bash. But yeah, you might be able to beat people playing like that, but you're not making the most of his offense. You're going to be missing out on damage because you're not bothering to read. You're just literally being like, oh yeah, I've thrown this out once, I'm going to throw this out next, or I'm just going to keep on spamming level 3, like charging up to level 3, trying to catch people who dodge at the wrong timing and don't roll away, which people will do at a lower level. But there's a big difference between just doing that randomly and then really trying to understand how your opponent thinks and how the actions that you take affect what they do, which is a huge part of read-based offense.
Yeah. Another thing is a lot of the people who tend to say that characters are ridiculously simple and don't require any thought whatsoever, like Warden or Berserker or Shaolin, they're usually fighting people who are as good as or worse than them, so they don't tend to think about these things, and they die to things that have been done like 100 times already in the same exact pattern or method and all of those things. So they don't actually know how in-depth it can go. They're not fighting people who are better than them. They're not really being challenged. So they just assume that, oh, this must be the case the whole way through the game at all skill levels. Like, people in Grandmaster duels must just be spamming Warden Shoulder Bash, or like top 5 or whatever just do the same thing. Or if in tournaments there must just be a Warden spamming Shoulder Bash. Like, they don't know. They haven't personally experienced it. They haven't seen it. They probably haven't watched anything like it. So they naturally just think that, oh, I don't like it, and I think it's easy, so I'm just going to assume it's like that through the whole game, and the game is ruined, apparently. That's what I tend to see in the vocal minority who express this viewpoint.
I mean, that's probably partly due to the fact that you can't really take a For Honor tournament and just make a little compilation of the best moments like you can with many other fighting games.
Exposure
like,
is also
all these amazing attacks he did, or like this here and this that. Like, and with For Honor, it's not really that. It's more the entire thing that you watch, rather than, yeah, this one parry was sick. Sure, that happens now and then, but it's not exactly what makes the tournament so competitive.
Exactly. Like, the method in which the people are exposed to content, like tournament VODs and so on, isn't exactly the best because we just don't have too much to work with, which is just a content thing. Like, there's a huge gap between being able to show why these things are competitive and why they work and how they really work competitively from what we have now and there, which is really unfortunate.
There's still a lot of players out there that don't think that Dominion is a competitive mode in the first place. Because it's such a, in their eyes, it's such a spam fest. Like, you're spamming feats, you're spamming attacks and group fights, and just, feeding revenge and getting revenge and here and that and everything.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's not how it goes, of course, in tournaments.
No.
At least not how it should be.
It's essentially a completely different universe. That's how most competitive scenes are. Although in other games, I find that people tend to be more readily accepting of competitive methods.
I mean, at the same time, the point was brought up earlier, I think, by Mistress, that For Honor probably is the first fighting game-ish game for a lot of players that we have in the community. And I wouldn't be, part of that. I didn't play any kind of traditional fighting game before. And the only other fighting game that I've picked up since then, which I guess is also kind of a pseudo-fighting game, is Super Smash Bros. And if I compare that to For Honor when it comes to the the neutral game and everything, that's actually already quite the difference. Well, that's not the topic. But I feel like there's just a lot of people that are not used to this kind of expectation of themselves, how they should be playing the game, and how much mind game there really is if you enter a game.
Probably not. it's probably very alien to a lot of people, which is why I somewhat understand why this kind of viewpoint exists, because when I first started playing For Honor, I definitely did not have the opinions I do now. I thought that certain things that weren't good were bullshit. I thought Release Valkyrie was broken because at the time I couldn't react to what she was doing, and that wasn't a case of reads, that was just me being bad. And I thought that she was way better than that, and I equated her to Peacekeeper and all sorts of stupid things. And that was mostly because I was just new to the game. And I find that a lot of people who are new to the game now and probably haven't played anything like it are likely to have this sort of opinion, especially when it's talked about by other people who they might see as senior to them.
All right, so if you look at Dominion again, and we have the difference between the usual matchmaking experience between the actual I don't know if I should call it competitive, but the organized play of the 4v4. It's the differences in those actually maybe, I don't know. You can definitely tell them, right? So
yeah.
If you're in a more organized play when it comes to Dominion, you have to be very wary of when you die, or rather, you shouldn't die in the first place, but the moment when you die and the fights that you pick are very important. Also, when you should fight, when you shouldn't fight, it's very important in Dominion. And usually in matchmaking, that is not a factor. You run in, you fight, and if it's a 3v1, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter, you fight and you die. And
yeah.
Usually that is not a thing, right? If you're in a more organized play, because you see a teammate getting 3v1, you're not going there. That guy's dead. He's doing well too, because he's holding up 3 people. So you're doing something instead on the other side of the map that involves, not engaging in that 3v1, turning it to a 3v2, which probably immediately turns into a 3v1 again.
Yeah.
So it's mostly about picking your fights, getting away from fights, and finishing up small encounters, like a one-on-one that you as quickly as you can, you turn into a 2-on-1, which should end within 10 seconds. And it's usually stuff like that. It's wrap-ups for the most part.
It's usually just playing cleaner in
exactly,
general. Especially with ganks and rotations.
It's a much more surgical operation compared to matchmaking, because in matchmaking you're just running in, hoping you get as many people as you can by helping your teammates not dying because they're running in blindly, and hoping that in the end of the day they win more fights than the enemy team and win the game. And that is probably why most people think that Dominion is such a spammy mode, because that is literally what it is. You're throwing, each and every person in the game is just throwing at each other until, one side loses. And that usually is the one that just lost a couple fights more than the other team.
Another one that I feel it's important, but it might not seem as important initially, is whether to respawn or not, which I think has been kind of maybe educated a bit more to other people ever since Breach, because even though Breach isn't really a competitive mode, there's still the element of when to respawn and when not to, depending on which side you're on, because if you can get a revive, or your teammate can get a revive, that might be better than just respawning and having to run all the way back to where the action is. And a lot of the time when I play MM, or when I played MM, I'd see a lot of people who die, and even if they were just in a fight that just got won, they would still respawn when they could have been revived and then went to go heal. And stuff like that isn't stuff you really tend to think about when against organized play or competitive players or whatever. That's something you're going to think about a lot more than just how long am I dead so I can respawn quicker and stuff like that.
I agree.
Good input, thank you.
I try my best.
Flash, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, going off of what you said and what Dan was saying about like casual players going up against 4-stacks. I mean, first of all, like there are obviously huge differences between both, right? Especially if we're comparing just like random teams versus like high level, like pre-made comps. Like there's like a random stack of 4 players is, even if it's a random stack of 4 high level players, if they're not in like a voice chat together, there's going to be huge like differences. For example, a high level like pre-made force team, everyone's going to know exactly where they're going to go with their character setup, right? Like for example, let's say we're playing on like Shard, for example, which actually has a little bit more like in depth of a start than a map like Citadel, because with Citadel you'll pretty much always be sending the fastest character up to your home point, and then everyone else runs mid. It's pretty much almost always it's going to be that kind of start, right? Whereas with Shard, you actually have some different options. You can send like 2 characters to mid, 2 characters to the A point. With the Shigoki comps recently, like there's been more experimentation with, you know, just sending like the Shigoki off to B to stall, or to maybe capture the point if they do 2-2, whereas, you know, someone else, like another team, might just stick to the 2-2 formula or whatever. But then you might also think things like, oh, if we know like the Shigoki is going down to B, then we might send like two characters down to B, one of them who's a strong ganker, and then send one up to A to stall, or maybe just send 2 to B, 2 to mid. A random stack of 4 players aren't going to be able to do anything like this, because they're not really going to be able to communicate properly outside of I mean, nobody uses in-game voice chat. I'm pretty sure the only time I've ever heard people fucking using game voice chat is when people are screaming racist profanities and raging at their team, or just doing dumb shit. The in-game quick chat isn't really going to be able to help you with that either, or it's going to take too long to actually type in what you want to do, and you can only type in things in the team chat on PC anyway. You can't do that on console, and even if you could on console, you'd probably take half an hour to write a 5-word sentence. So like one big difference is going to be just like how constructed and organized the team play is, and this is something that you're not really going to be able to overcome by yourself. I mean, it's like I've always said, right? Like like no matter how good you are, you can be like the best player in the game, but if you're just playing by yourself, you're not in VC, and you have a bad team, you're never going to be able to win. Because let's say you're playing a character who can fight by himself against multiple other characters. Wow. So, you know, let's say we're playing like Berserker, Nobushi, Jangjun, somebody like this. Even if you win like the 1v2s, 1v3s, whatever, you can't hold the map by yourself. So let's say like if you're winning like a 1v2 on their home point, and you're winning it every single time, maybe even the odd 1v3, but then your team are losing mid, and then are also getting backcapped, or they are losing like, you know, 1v2s, 1v3s, or whatever, or even if it's reasonably even, like the enemy team are going to be getting their feats like all together, and they're also going to be able to control the other 2 points on the map. And no matter how well you perform on that one single point, you're going to fall behind in points, and you're eventually going to lose. Like the only way you can win is if your team are at least competent enough to at least hold like another one of the points on the map for some amount of time, because you'll never be able to make enough points off of that one point constantly being contested, even if you're killing the other players. And not to mention that the enemy team will also get their feeds. But if we're talking about like what casual players can try to do to try and not get completely destroyed by an actual pre-made, the only thing I can recommend is if you're playing by yourself and you know you're a good player, then pick one of the characters I just mentioned, you know, somebody that has the potential to carry the game. So you would pick somebody, you know, like Berserker, like Nobushi, like Jangjun, or maybe even a character, you know, like Nusha, just because when she gets caltrops, she is really good when outnumbered. You know, somebody like this who is strong by themselves, even against multiple characters, and just do your best to get your feats as soon as possible, to go where like your team isn't, I guess, and to try and do as much as you can by yourself. If you're in gank situations with people who don't know how to gank, there's, again, not really a lot you're going to do, because the ganks are going to be really inefficient and they're going to feed revenge. But let's say you're ganking with a raider who is literally just throwing top heavies, and let's say you are playing let's say you're playing Zerg, so you don't have any kind of bashes you can use to create openings. Literally the only thing you can really kind of do is either try to throw off the opponent's indicators just by like throwing heavy feints constantly, or you can try to GB just as the attack's going to land, just to create openings. Like, yes, it's still going to feed a lot of revenge. Yes, it's still going to be highly inefficient, but at least that way you're not just letting your teammates spam attacks into a guard or to get parried and dealing next to no damage. So like that, there are kind of things you can do to improve your chances or to improve the efficiency of the dumb decisions that your teammates make. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, you're always going to be at a huge disadvantage. It's the same with any team game, right? You play Counter-Strike, Go, and you play in a full pug team versus a full, scrim team. You'll more than likely get fucking destroyed unless there's an absolutely ginormous skill difference between the pug team and the scrim team. Same with like Dota 2, same with League of Legends. Like full random teams are going to get destroyed by full pre-made teams with voice chat. It's just the way team games go. But there are at least a couple of things you can do to ease the pain.
And adding to that as well is what I've found from my experience of solo queue, which is sadly a lot, is instead of watching the points, you should probably watch your teammates. So instead of seeing, what, of course you have to watch also what points you have and what points you don't have, but instead of making decisions by purely seeing, okay, we have these points, so I'm going here, you should probably put more effort in reading into where your teammates are going. Right? If you see a teammate and you haven't won a single fight and you've been always getting ganked for 3 people and you're dying, you probably should go with whoever is going to any point and first see how many people are they fighting against. If there's only one person, you can go there and maybe help them gank. And this is of course assuming that they're not completely terrible, so they can actually help you and not actually ruin every situation. In which case you probably just gonna do what Clutch said and go alone wherever your team isn't and hope that things kind of go all right. But I usually have the most success with somewhat okay players by looking at my alive teammates rather than the points, to make sure that I first win fights and then points, because my team needs to be alive, and they, when they haven't shown that they can stay alive themselves, then you have to help them a little with that. And that can work out pretty well, even against 4 stacks. This of course doesn't help you against people that are actually communicating, because if you go to your teammate that's in a 1v1 and you're trying to help him and immediately gets reinforcement, make it a 2v2, even a 3v2, then of course you're never going to win that. Because if they're communicating, they already see you coming. They're going to tell you, hey, I need help, and that's probably not going to work. But usually people are not communicating over voice chat in matchmaking. So even if you go against a 4 stack, you still have a okay fighting chance. It kind of depends on who you get and if people leave the game or not. But it's definitely not a forfeit situation.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I've played my own unfortunately high amount of solo queue. That's what I did until I joined For Glory and started playing more scrims and playing with better players in matchmaking and so on. And generally I tried my best sort of to do these sorts of things, like just watch what my team is doing and so on. And instead of just doing what some players do, where they'll just go reinforce a point and stay on it and just see how many people they can kill before the game ends, and typically it'll be losing because they're not contributing anything to the rest of the team. Trying to work with the rest of your team is probably the best thing you can really do, even if it's the most limited way you can do it.
Which by the way, that too is a read sometimes. Placement on the map can be considered a read if you don't already know where people are going. Let's say exactly. In the beginning, we had this at the very beginning of the podcast when we made the example of a very, very small and sometimes ignored read is if you go on a point and you choose to stay on it because you expect someone to come there, even though you don't already know this. This is technically a very small read that may or may not, save you a game. And placing yourself on the map definitely comes into play there. And you definitely can make these kinds of decisions without information. Usually you want as much information as you possibly can to predict where people are going and what points are they going to take. But
yeah,
it's as I said, it's probably more a very small part of the actual reads and reactions kind of gameplay that you usually have in For Honor. I think most actual reads come in group fights, where there's more as a one-on-one. In a one-on-one neutral game in For Honor, there's not many reads to be done, which we had earlier, which is pretty much just 2 characters plus, maybe like conk and stuff. But the neutral game in For Honor is really not that complex that you need to have a lot of reads going on. But the more players you have, the more reads you will have to do. In a 2-on-1, you're going to have to do quite a couple of reads, especially if the enemy team does know how to gank, right? You know what they want to do. They know that you are aware, and from there on you can make reads, or get them off guard. And you can also make reads in 2v2 fights, 3v3s, and 4v4s. And I think that's where the game shines in the first place, where you have the group fights.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say, I would actually say that there are probably more reads involved with ganking or anti-ganking than there are in actual team fights, because in actual team fights there's still a lot of reacting going on depending on the character you're playing, right? Like if you're playing a character like Kensei, like Nobushi, like Warden, anybody who has like a long range 500 or 600 ms attack which can cover a lot of distance, has good tracking, you can use to punish a lot of attacks on reaction, right? You see a Kensei with his zone, like an Ibushi can react to that and get a guaranteed Cobra Strike, or another Kensei can get his own zone, or a Warden can zone or do his dash heavy. But in when you're being ganked, we use a 1v2, and let's say I'm playing Jang Jun and I'm playing against, I guess I'll pick a character that wants to GB, that doesn't really gank, and then I'll pick a character that does gank. So let's say it's a Kensei and we'll say a Berserker. So the Kensei is obviously going to be the one looking to GB, right? Because if the Berserker GBs, what does the Kensei do? He gets a pommel strike off top heavy, which is 20 damage. It's going to feed a lot of revenge. So the Berserker is pretty much never going to be guard breaking you. So you know that the entire gank setup is going to revolve around basically the Kensei trying to guard break you, and trying to position in a way so that the Berserker can zone off of the guard break and won't hit his ally if possible. So there are a few things you can do in this situation, right? You can make the read on when they're going to guard break, and you can do this by looking how they're acting, how aggressive they're being. Are they trying to aggressively push closer to you? Is the Kensei trying to aggressively push closer to you? Could be a giveaway. But then you can also unlock sprint away to create distance. But then the other enemies might know or expect you to be unlocking to go away, right? And they might try and slip in a fast attack to catch you off guard. At which point, if you know they're going to do this, it adds another layer of reads. If I unlock, or are they expecting me to unlock to try and create some distance here? Should I be aware of them trying to attack into me? At which point you can maybe try and get a parry, especially as a JJ. Getting a parry in a outnumbered situation is really good, really strong, because his unblockable zone is really powerful in those situations. Then there's extra reads on top of that, which aren't as those are the core reads in the situation, but there are other reads you can make as well, such as let's say with JJ you obviously have Shifu, and let's say you know that if you throw out an attack on, let's say the Berserker, because let's say you make the read that your opponents are expecting you to be maybe attacking into the Kensei with light attacks or whatever, making reads that he's going to be guard breaking. It's risky because the Zerk can probably still Zerk on indicator to a lot of things and still catch you with a zone. But let's say you're going to be attacking into the Kensei, and then let's say the Zerk tries to heavy you or tries to do a dash light on you, like a dash forward light. You can Shifu the recovery on your attack. You make the read that the opponent's going to be doing this. You see them going for it, you Shifu, and then you can zone and land extra punish, right? So the anti-gank situations add all these level of reads, but then for the gankers themselves, there are also multiple levels as well. For example, let's say if you're ganking with Kensei and Shaman, mix it up a little bit. How do you counter this? You can do the similar kind of things, right? You can attack when you think they're going to be guard breaking you to land 3 damage. You can unlock and move away, at which point they might try and attack into you. For example, the Shaman might try to dash attack you. And you can also roll away, correct, right? But you know your opponent's going to be doing these three things. Say if you're the shaman, and you have to make the reads on what they're going to do, right? So you have to, let's say you make the read that they're going to attack into you, and you make the read that they're going to be attacking into your opponent. So you have a couple of choices. You can either try to maybe anticipate they're going to light, and then anticipate your teammate will block the light, and you guard break them out of the blocked attack. Or you make the read that they're going to be rolling away, at which point you get your dash heavy into combo heavy guaranteed, right, to punish the roll. So you need to know all of the... First of all, you need to know what optimal gank setups are, and then you also need to know how your opponents are going to be reacting to these different gank setups, so you can make the read on what your opponent's going to do and the optimal way to counter this. Obviously, with Shaman, you have reads after someone's been bled as well, right? Because there's not always going to be a guaranteed setup where somebody can dodge the bleed pounce 100% of the time, like with the Bushi bleed into Sidewinder. You often have to make a read. But that's just an example of how in gank situations themselves, the mind games involved with ganks and anti-ganks are actually possibly the deepest out of any situation in 4v4.
And it's probably also very important to say here that in order to actually learn to make these reads, you're not gonna just watch people do it, because you also have to play it. It's very important that you actually do those things yourself, because sometimes when things get a bit crazy and your opponent gets aware that you are making reads, they will start making reads on, your reads, and maybe that sometimes involves going back to the initial thing, right? Kind of go make 3 rights, and you're back where you started. And someone that watches it is going to say, "Oh, he just did the basic thing," but in reality, it's there's a much bigger mind game behind it. So the most obvious option wasn't obvious at all in this situation. So it's definitely important to do these things yourself, because the game, maybe not For Honor particularly in every situation. Maybe there are some situations where it's very blatant, but for the most part, reading your opponent, that goes both ways. And sometimes reads will be made on reads, and by just watching it, you usually don't always get the full experience of it.
The other thing related to that point is the simple fact of playing characters that you struggle to read. Because I think you basically touched on it already, but one of the things I found that helped me grow a lot as a player, even though I'm not like super into For Honor anymore, but it's still there, is instead of just playing one character all the time, I eventually graduated to at least playing every character in the game, at least for like 5 or 6 reps, and just playing them, figuring out all their moves and so on, and like just figuring out what I could think was the best application for all of these. And against other players who played the same character, it then made it easier for me to figure out what I would do in that situation and what they might want to be doing as well, especially if they're better than me.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think everybody who's like really got into this game has taken that path and really just gotten to know each character, their movesets in and out, what they can do in certain situations, what they can't, and then just kind of adapt to that to day-to-day game.
Yeah, like it's definitely not a problem if you do that and then go back to playing like just 1 or 2 characters. Like eventually I basically just exclusively played Berserker because he's just the character I liked the most. But I still knew what just about everybody else could do because I put enough experience into them. Doesn't mean I necessarily performed as well on them as someone who is well versed opposed to me, but it does mean that I know what they might want to be doing. So I think it's probably a fairly healthy way to look at it. You should get a lot more into all the characters to figure out what's going on. And of course someone will probably point out, but some of these characters you have to buy and so on. I mean, I think that's kind of not really the point I want to go on for too long, but eventually you're going to be able to play these characters regardless. I think you can Are you able to use them without buying them in the training mode or anything like that? I can't remember.
Yeah, you can practice with them. Yeah, you can practice with them as much as you want. They're free in practice mode. You can play them.
Oh, well,
Just no multiplayer.
yeah. Unfortunately, you can't do that in multiplayer. So,
Yeah.
if you were able to, for whatever reason, that would be pretty good. But you can't. So at that point, it just becomes a case of playing the game more and being able to play them, which I feel like that might be a bit of a too big of an investment. But if you care about the game enough to want to know what everyone does, I suppose it's worth it.
I just had to spend another $30 for Marching Fire since I moved to PC.
Yeah, the only reason I really, because at the time I still played the game more, I basically bought Marching Fire just to be able to stay on top of the game, at least know what's going on rather than lose it immediately, not knowing what all the characters could do. Not necessarily the best place I've put my money, but I think it helped in the long run.
Yeah. Like, for me, I'm glad I bought Marching Fire again because I was actually playing with Zach G. He's a very skilled peacekeeper, and I was playing Kensei, and I couldn't do anything. Everything I would do, react to everything perfectly. So I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I can't deal with this character. Let me try Orochi. I noticed I was doing better as Orochi, but the thing is, I suck as Orochi because I don't play Orochi. So I'm like, okay, well maybe if I play someone like Shellin, who I know a little bit better, or much better, I'll do better. And that's what ended up happening. I did a lot better. I was still having a lot of trouble with the zone interrupts. I'd have to make a lot of reads on those, when he's going to do them because I couldn't react to them whatsoever. On top of them being unreactable to begin with, the latency wasn't too great either. So it came down to, I would, do a read, try and get a top light off, and then I'd be my key stance. And then my read would be, okay, is he going to zone and try and interrupt the key stance? And should I then, do a right light attack to try and get the superior block right attack off with the unblockable? Or should I just do a dodge attack or even a top light? And then if I try and read the zone, like I said, okay, is he going to do it as soon as I enter key stance, or is he going to wait a moment and then do a zone? Because the timing is very, very specific if I want to try and counter that with the superior blocked right attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, so reads can get really, really interesting and complex in this game at certain points. But from neutral, not as much, I would say.
Yeah, I feel that in neutral they're not exactly the most prevalent, but they do exist for some characters. But generally, it's usually with those specific characters who can go on the offensive where they tend to show up a lot more. Specifically, like Shaolin or Warden, and to a degree, Berserker.
Yeah, and even somebody like Highlander, you can make a couple of reads there, and of course Conqueror, Peacekeeper. Really just the zone. And then the lights can be kind of spicy too, depending on what country you're in and who you're playing against.
Yeah.
But yeah, any of you guys have anything?
Yeah, I don't actually know if there's any unclear things that we have left out, because we've talked about. Okay, so let's just rebuttal. No, not rebuttal. Like just go through all the points that we had today. So we talked about what are reads in the first place and what are reactions. What are reads and reactions in For Honor specifically, and then we've been talking about a lot about how you can even make all these reads, and how does a player get to the point where he can make reads. What is considered a read even? Like sometimes you can react to things, and it's fine to react to things in For Honor. And well, we got a bit off topic here and there with talks about Dominion, which technically you could see as well as a it's a situational awareness read, I guess, to stretch the topic to the maximum extent that we can. And I think we talked about most things that you can talk about when you take into consideration what's a read, what's a reaction, and how can you improve as a player knowing these things. Because it's in the end of the game, in the end of the day, it's really a thing of self-improvement that you just have to get better with. You have to become more comfortable with. It's sadly not something that you can just study and get better as. It's something that you get more comfortable as you go. But I think we did the topic justice in that regard. I did get the question, but it's not really on topic, I think. If the game will be more balanced with the Harbinger stuff. I don't think anyone really knows. I think the game overall will probably try to get more neutral heavy when it comes to reads and reactions. Probably more towards reads than reactions, as most fighters do. But it's written in the stars for now.
It's pretty much a coin flip, but we don't really know how it's going to turn out. And it is a big 50-50, and we don't know if it's going to improve at all because we don't know what the changes are going to be yet, and we'll have to just find out when it happens, really. We can't really make any sweeping generalizations on whether or not something will improve with something that isn't really available yet.
Yeah, because, you know, like, the game has all these flaws, but at least they're buffing.
Oh, I think you cut out there.
Yeah, I think. Okay. Are you still here, Raven?
Yeah, no, I was saying that the game has all these flaws, but they're still buffing the law, so that's good.
Yes, exactly. Right, so
one thing we should not.
With that, is there any other questions that came from your chats, Setmix or Cludge, that you want to address? Because I know you're streaming this as well.
There were no questions in my chat.
Yeah, I figured.
I think everyone's probably fallen asleep by this.
Yeah, that's probably very likely. Right, so I think we're done with this topic then, and that is the only topic that we had today. So I thank everyone for coming. I was not expecting to organize this in the first place. I didn't organize it anyways, but I didn't want to be the moderator today. But I guess I am.
I didn't expect to be here at all.
Yeah. The next one will be a lot more thought out.
I didn't expect to be either, because today was supposed to be my fucking day off, and I only woke up like an hour ago.
I'm surprised that you're streaming this.
Did you just wake up to DMs?
The entire time.
Yes, I woke up to Dev's DM.
That's actually what happened to me as well.
I don't know, like, I woke up and I was just chilling. I was playing Soul Calibur. I just got messages from Dem saying, like, alright, do you want to be on a podcast? I was like, I'm not that great talking to a lot of people. Do I want to do this?
I put the Reddit discussion
from
in
making
the
a
chat.
Post. Yeah, like, I just
think
made that
all
post
pretty well.
yesterday and that was it. I didn't expect this to happen, but I'm kind of glad it did, because it's in my opinion, it's good to talk about these things, especially when there aren't really any resources for this.
I mean, I'm kind of surprised that there's even so many people out there that, you know, are questioning that there are reads in this game. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest.
I usually just see it as, it's usually just written down as, oh, it's just all luck, or
yes.
It's just a guess. But the thing is while I get yes, there is, like I said at the beginning, there is guesswork. It seems like the way they write it is almost as if it has absolutely nothing to it other than a guess, which is something I find quite unfortunate. So it kind of surprises me how common it is, which is generally why I made that post in the first place, because I was just like, wait, a lot of people surprisingly think this. Like, it's not like the vast majority of people, but it's surprisingly common.
I think the reason why people are like that is literally because they don't understand exactly, you know, things like conditioning and things like this. Because, like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, I guess you can kind of say it's guesswork because you'll never be able to make the correct read 100% of the time, right? No matter how good you are. Obviously, as you get better, you're like the better you get, the more accurate your reads get, right? And you make more correct reads, but you're never going to be at the point where you make 100% the correct reads in every single game you play, because some people will just, you know, just do something they shouldn't do, or just do something completely random out of nowhere, and it would completely throw you off. But
yeah, it's completely impossible.
But
to, like, always do it right.
People seem to think that because you can't do it 100% of the time, that it just automatically means, you know, oh, it's always just a guess, because they don't understand the concepts of condition. They don't realize that how, like, the things that you do to, like, your opponent is going to influence how they act. And if you understand this and understand, you know, like, the levels of thinking behind what's going on in the game, then you can start to make much more accurate reads. I mean, there's a reason why, like, for example, if you watch, like, if you were to say watch like a random Jang Jun player being like 1v2, where he just like spams attacks till he's out of stamina and dies, versus somebody like me in like a 1v2, you'll see why like a lot of like say like a lot of attacks I throw out will typically land at least on one person, because, you know, I understand like the positioning, I understand what it looks like when somebody says trying to guard break me or trying to do something to me, whereas, you know, somebody who's lesser skilled would just be throwing out attacks just to fucking, like, just out of panic, or just to
just hoping it works.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that's the same with a lot of things. Like for example, let's say gank setups to a lot of people might look like bad plays, right? If you don't understand why they're making them. A prime example of that is how, like, actually something that happened, it was either yesterday or the day before, like somebody made a thread on Reddit about like me versus like a Shigoki with a Berserker teammate, and they were saying how like going for top heavy off of like going for a GB is like, you know, it's really bad and stuff, but they don't understand that the optimal gank setup with a Berserker around is for you to guard break, and then the Berserker zones, and then you land the top heavy, and then you can chain into the unblockable heavy for the Berserker to like GB to guarantee damage, or to catch them out of like trying to dodge away from it. But to somebody who doesn't know that, and only simply knows that you get as like, say, like a Jang Jun zone off of a guard break and not a top heavy, that would look like a really bad play. But they don't they don't understand it the same way like how somebody who doesn't even know about conditioning would think that like it's all guesswork, because they just don't understand that these things exist, or they don't understand these concepts, which I think again is like a reason why we seem to have so many players who will say these seemingly really stupid things, because these are the kind of people, right, that will want to talk about a particular topic without actually fully understanding everything that goes on behind the game itself, or the actual like meta of a game, or anything like that. They just lack the knowledge for it.
Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why my favorite term gank tech exists, because it's like, to some people it's this elusive concept that they're not aware of. Like there's some kind of specific tech they have to master. It's because they're just not used to it. They don't know, they don't engage in it, so they just kind of put it down to like some buzzword, essentially.
Yeah, and then I think from that point on, it kind of gets demonized within, like, you know, the really casual community, the really casual scene, the people who get hit by it often and don't know how to counter it and are just frustrated because.
Yeah, that's a fairly fair way of looking at it. Oh.
No,
I was only streaming for this podcast because, like I said, today it was supposed to be like a rest day for me.
Oh, he'll like that. I'm the Berserker God.
I just noticed I was muted on stream, but not on Discord. That's
I've been
great.
told Alernikin wants to join.
Oh,
Alernikin wants to join, but
do we even have anything else to talk about?
I was just about to say,
yeah,
we've already finished.
No idea.
We've been going for 1.5 hours. I don't think there's anything left anymore.
All right, boys.
Unless he has something.
Right? The plan is, boys, right? Get him into the Chill a Bit Then Drag channel, right? And then drag him in, and then
It's just gonna be him.
Nice.
It's just gonna be him by himself.
Sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a good plan, yeah.
It's,
all right.
For this topic, there really isn't too much to talk about.
Yeah, I said in the beginning this is a 30 minutes topic, to be honest, and that's why we got off topic quite a bit.
And ruins political discussion.
Yeah, let's go. No. Right. So let me go ahead and host Barakit, who's doing 4v4 scrims. I was muted on stream earlier, so you didn't hear this, but Barakit does 4v4 scrims. And you can pester him about reads. He's very, very, very adamant about telling you everything he does and how great he is. So you can go there and see some high-level 4v4 play. I don't know who they're playing, but I think it's their team, their tournament team, fighting some people from For Glory. Someone, I don't know. And I thank everyone for coming here today, discussing this very in-depth topic. And next time we're gonna have some, probably more topics in the first place, more than one topic, and most definitely some talking points, so we don't find ourselves struggling to find what we even want to talk about. But
hopefully with like actual organization. And
yes, not like 20 minutes before
they were going to be here.
And yeah.
Before we go, can I say one last thing?
Sure.
No.
Don't say sub to PewDiePie or I'll kick you.
It's not gonna be sub to PewDiePie. No. Put an F in chat because rip Damien. That's my boy.
Yes,
rip Damien.
yes.
Man.
Goodbye, Damien.
Goodbye, Damien.
Is tomorrow gonna be his like goodbye stream or something?
No, he's gone, man. He's done.
Oh, he's already gone. Oh, okay.
Boys, Damien's not
Yeah,
dead.
he left.
He's gone to another job. Like we don't need to act as though he's
He's not-
died.
Rest in peace. We'll miss you.
No, he's
You were
dead.
going too soon.
No, he's
You were
dead.
so
He's
young, yet
100%.
family.
He's 100% dead, guys.
Dude,
What
there's
about
no
all the
life
data?
after For Honor.
No, For Honor is where the good souls go to find their new place in heaven.
Alright, so wrap it up. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. Much appreciated.
Coming up like this guy.